Lynn, this is another question from a Democratic member of the Senate. Mr. LaRouche, when FDR moved to address the banking crisis in the 1930s, he made no bones about the fact that building our way out of the Great Depression would carry with it hardship, and that it would be hard on the population. Right now, I am inclined to vote against the bailout. But I also don't want to lie to my constituents and tell them that I have a painless solution, especially if we do not. My question to you is what, in your assessment, is the pain threshold of your proposal?
The pain threshold of my proposal, if you don't support it, you're dead. It's that simple. That's a question of leadership. I mean, you could take a lot of people and you say, okay, this guy may be a good corporal, but we don't got to make a commanding general out of him because he's going to lose the war. Roosevelt never lost the war. There's two things involved here. You don't get into foolish fights if you don't have to. But you don't use the rule of not getting into foolish fights not to fight when you have to. The time comes when you decide you're going to fight. You don't start fights. The enemy started the fight. We're trying to defend the United States against the enemy, which happens to include the United States president. He's not the enemy in the sense of a foreign foe. He's the enemy in terms of his idiocy, is itself an enemy of the United States. His father's foolishness and his own idiocy. Maybe his father helped create the idiocy. I'm concerned that there are people in this country, including many people who are poor people, the poor people who are burning the tails of the members of the House of Representatives. They're fighting. They're not rich. They're poor. They don't have much, and that's being taken away from them, even food. Then you have people in our institutions, some of them former military leaders, other positions, or associations which they had in the past, which they cling to still as their tradition, which they fight for. We have people in this country who will fight and defend this nation, but we don't have a concentration of that kind of leadership in our political class. Because carefully, look, I deal with politicians, and the politicians know this. They'll even admit it to me in a private discussion. They are sophists. This culture is sophist. The more you associate with people in the so-called higher social ranks of society, the worse the sophistry is. Look at the guy on Wall Street. Is that schnook human? Does he have human values? Is his life organized around human values? Is he doing something for society? He's having a frantic fit, a sexual fit on the floor of the exchange over whether he's going to get an orgasm that day or not. By the financial orgasm in this case. Is this guy going to fight for the country? Is he willing to give up something for the nation, for future generations? No. I want more money. I want more money. I need it. Well, who needs that amount of money that these golden parachutes represent? Who needs that kind of money? What for? What, are you going to give it to the poor? You're going to build something, a factory, that you're against? No. The problem is we do have people in this country who have guts. But we are a society which is basing government on the will of the people, the consent of the people. And therefore, we depend largely upon the consent of the people. And often, this becomes the consent of the poor people. Because, not only because they're the most numerous, because they have the most to lose and the least to gain. And therefore, poorer people tend to be more courageous than people with more money. This is a prime principle of Christian doctrine, by the way. Through the gate. The camel through the gate, the eye of the camel. And it's the poor who have nothing to gain or lose, but except life and the purpose of life itself. and who think not of themselves as much, but of children. Let me just interpolate something which is very significant here, which I've mentioned recently repeatedly. One of the characteristics of the baby boomer generation is that you think back to my experience, for example, which is fairly relevant these days. There's a shortage of people of my age. We'd be much better off if we had more people my age. Unfortunately, they went away and didn't stay with me and so on. But that we used to have a sense of value, which is based on several generations. We think of the immigrant families who came in from poor immigrants who came in from Europe into the United States, for example. They would come in and they would end up, in the immigration process proceedings, and often their skills were limited. Even if they had skills, they had trouble getting their skills, professional skills, qualified inside the United States for use. So they would work, and there are people in this room who are grandchildren of just exactly these types of people. And they would work, and they would almost slave to make a life which is better for their children's generation. And they would look forward with great joy to what their grandchildren might become. And you would often have people came off the boat as really hand labor, and their grandchildren were physicians, scientists, and so forth in this country. That was the nature of the country. And what has happened now, we have lost that sense, especially in the white-collar baby boomer influenced generation. People think about themselves as a self-contained entity. They don't think of their life as having a purpose which reaches beyond their demise. They don't realize that the meaning of their life lies not in what they experience as such directly, but what comes out of it. What they can be confident will come out of it. And the people who think that way, which ordinary poor people tend to think that way, will fight for the life of their grandchildren. Whereas the baby boomer will not. And I have a lot of dealing with children of baby boomers, as you may know. And I know what their existential complaint is. Their parents' generation does not have a commitment to the future generations. They say, we had a child. Oh, how nice. A little toy to play with. Huh? The toy, I don't like that toy anymore. Throw it away. I got a new wife. I got a new husband. I got a new nothing. I got to change my life. I don't like that toy anymore. There's no purpose in life. And what we've bred generations which lack a purpose in life. And a purpose in life extends beyond your own life. It extends to respect for what came before you. You try to think back as far back, and generally you can think back to grandparents' generation. But some of us, we think, like me, we think much longer. You think back to more ancient parts of your family and the experience of people of that generation. And you think about what was the commitment that they made on which you prosper, or which your society today prospers. And you understand that. And you look at your life in that way as if you were going to die. And you look what's coming out of your life for your children, your grandchildren, and those generations coming ahead. Are you building for the future? The father used to take the child by the hand, or the grandfather, and take him to a great work which is accomplished by mankind, and say, I built that. I was part of building that. And that's for you. That's the American. But we have many people among the baby boomer generation who've lost that sense of identity. They've lost the sense of immortality. And their religious beliefs show it.